An update tonight in the deadly police shooting of a black man in North Carolina.
Another day, another tragic reminder of the dangers black and brown citizens face for being born into a world of hate that has branded them as suspects from day one. On this week's episode of the PowerPLAY Show, we will hear from those young voices, all of whom have witnessed, in large part to social media, the unending narrative of black and brown lives being lost way too soon. Our voices and police killings, this week on the PowerPLAY Show.
From the studios at Hull Bay Productions, this is the PowerPLAY.
Welcome to the PowerPLAY Show. I'm your host, Tonya McGrath. Carl Dorsey III, Patrick Warren Sr., Frederick Cox, Xavier Hill, Mikhail Rose, Kurt Reinhold, Marvin Scott, Dante Wright, Matthew Williams, Makia Wright, Andrew Brown. This is a partial list of some of the latest victims of police shootings. We can argue who is responsible for escalating the situations that led to the death of these young black and majority unarmed men and women. But what we can't argue is the fact that police are causing the deaths of these young black unarmed men and women. One of the most distressing parts of this seemingly nonstop string of police killings of black people is the fact that more times than not, the officer involved in the shooting can hide behind the claim that they feared for their lives, even if the victim was shot in the back, as has become the case for so many deadly episodes involving law enforcement. In a handful of those cases, such as Antoine Rose, a 13-year-old boy killed in Pittsburgh, and Stephon Clark, a 22-year-old killed in Sacramento, both of whom were unarmed, the officers either avoided being criminally charged altogether or acquitted despite damning evidence that the cops' lives were not threatened and there was no cause for them to resort to lethal force or any violence for that matter. My panel tonight is Ashley Collins and Kyle Brown, my son and daughter, and returning guests to the PowerPLAY Show, along with Journey King, a high school senior, and my cousin, and Brian Barber, operations manager of BroncoEyeRadio.com in North Carolina. Everyone, welcome to the PowerPLAY Show. So I want to start with you, Brian. You're in North Carolina with the latest killing of Andrew Brown, a father of 10-year-old who, according to reports, woke up to a warrant being served and decided to drive away in his car when officers opened fire and killed him. 8 or 9 shots, I believe. What is the mood like there in North Carolina?
In North Carolina, is one, at least in Fayetteville, it's quiet. And it's a difference between it being quiet where there's nothing going on and there's a quiet where it's like nobody just wants to kind of feel anything. It's kind of like everybody's just kind of walking around. It's like you have a heavy heart and you're like, man, it's just another day. And it's kind of like a sad feeling. It's like everybody's kind of feeling for each other. Of course, things are a little bit flipped in Elizabeth City where that went on, but just kind of in the surrounding areas, it's kind of like everybody's just walking around with a heavy heart. So it's just quiet.
That heavy heart you speak of, do either one of you also feel that kind of heaviness, Journey, Ashley, or Kyle?
I mean, I definitely do. I feel like last year, June, I totally had to turn off the news, and I don't think I've turned it back on since. I have had a lot of conversations. People keep getting killed. There's a lot of videos on social media and the media and the news. I just feel like for me, I don't want to see it every day. Not that I don't know that it's going on and that it's not affecting me heavily. Because it's affecting me in that way, I can't immerse myself into it anymore.
Journey, what about you? You are a high school senior, and for all intents and purposes, you're looking at the next important step in your life. But how do these recent events, how do they affect you?
I think the main sentiment is exhaustion. I'm the president of my school's Black Student Union, and I think, the main thing that I hear from my peers is, they're tired. They're tired of seeing the same thing. They're tired of having to, face their emotions with this. It's very exhausting.
And Kyle, what are you kind of thinking and feeling with these latest events of police shootings?
I'm less familiar on this story. I did hear about it. I'm having trouble compartmentalizing. I just can't have a civil conversation with someone over something very small. I just kind of want to fight. And it's not because I'm emotionally unstable or anything. I just can't focus on everything.
But I imagine that, even for me, I'm much older than all of you, and just the kind of downtrodden feeling of, my gosh, it's happening again. And feeling is either, one, we're getting too desensitized with the killings, or it's just, as Ashley put it, it's just too much. You just you try and turn it off, and it shows up on your feed. And I wonder what that does just to your psyche. Like, as Kyle mentioned, we're coming out of a pandemic. We're slowly coming out of a pandemic, I should say. And we've already had all of those issues surrounding just isolation and not being around to kind of opening up the world and seeing all of this. So what does that do for you? Just talk emotionally about just what all of this news is doing to you. And did the verdict last week have any positive light or positive effect on you, Brian?
Kind of similar to what Ashley mentioned. When quarantine really hit, my mom would, of course, I went back home, stay with my parents, just like a lot of people did, and CNN was on all the time. And I would live around and I'd be like, Mom, can you just change to something? I don't care if it's SpongeBob, just something that is more positive than what is going on. And it's not as she mentioned, it's not like you don't care, like you don't want to know about it, but it just hurts. And like every day it just seems like something new. So with this, even when the verdict hit, it was like I watched it with some of my coworkers, and we all were gathered around, and we kind of like took one deep breath. But as you take one deep breath for one scenario, something else happens. So it was like, man, it was good because it felt like you got justified in one end, but there's so many other ends that we still have yet to get justice for. So it was kind of bittersweet, I guess.
And I see you nodding in agreement, Ashley. What did last week's verdict do for you, if anything?
One, I work in an environment where I'm one of the only Black people there. And constantly seeing what's happening in the world affects me so that it may affect me differently than the next person, where not everyone's an activist. I'm angry and I have to turn it off, sadly, or censor myself in certain environments. And that takes a lot of energy, and learning, what conversations to have and what conversations not to have, and learning who wants to really have a conversation and who just kind of wants to hear you speak. It's been very difficult to handle all of it, and then show up to work, with a smile on my face and keep going like the rest of the world has to. It's hard. The verdict was great. People should be held accountable for their actions. And then in the next breath, I feel like there's a lot to be done for there to be some real changes. But, yes, am I too excited about someone being held accountable for their actions? Not really, because that's how it should be. But yeah, is it a step in the right direction? We'll see.
You and your friends and the people that you're surrounded with, do you guys talk about these issues? Do you find yourself, as Ashley put it, sometimes the one person in the group, and you're, feeling as though you have to speak for all Black people, as we probably all have been in that position at least once in our lifetime?
I lead the Black Student Union, so we do debrief these issues, but not every time they happen, because it is exhausting and it's just like, it's a lot. However, I think this generation has just become exceedingly well at compartmentalizing their feelings because so much is happening and social media, you're taking in so much at once. But yeah, these we definitely do talk about these issues in classes. And yeah, sometimes you do feel like you're the only one, because sometimes you may be the only one of color in your class, but at least the conversations are happening.
So I'm going to throw out this next thought, and I want you, this is not how I feel, but it has been argued that perhaps if these young Black and brown women just complied with police orders, maybe if they didn't run away, maybe if they, just did everything correct, that we wouldn't have these issues. What's your response to that, Kyle? Because I have seen, at least, that there have been many of times when Black and brown people have complied and they're still dead. Philippe Castile is a great example of that, and they're still dead. So what is your reaction to the idea that, well, maybe if they just did so-and-so, they would be alive?
First thought came was, what are the threats then? Because if emotional, acting emotional in a situation, is a threat, then I feel like it's hard, because it's always like everybody reacting to a situation that only the cop and the victim is there for. So it's really only who's working. And I don't believe that there's a way to act to change their thinking,
to be calm. And so, Brian, I wonder how easy it is to feel. I mean, I've been pulled over for driving too fast, for instance, right? And already my heart rate's up, my anxiety's up, and I am not the statistical victim of these police shootings, but still I feel that same kind of energy. So how could you not immediately show some level of anxiety when having to confront or be confronted by police?
I mean, when you have situations like this take place every day, and then you have an interaction with police, you never know what somebody's feeling. Like, you never know what is going through somebody's head. If I'm driving around and I get pulled over, I'm thinking, man, now I'm thinking, like, you're thinking step by step, you're thinking hands here, you're thinking, but you don't know what day somebody had. You don't know what previous interactions somebody's had with police. Whether you're a good cop or not, somebody's interactions with police hasn't always been good. So you just never know what's going to happen. And what I would like to see is at least just talking to people. Like, a lot of times in situations, what you see is the cops will come up and they just are automatically just on go, like ready to go. And I understand you don't know what situation you're approaching, but you don't know how much you can de-escalate just by talking to somebody.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's just kind of frustrating to see this happen over and over again, and just to know that there are so many other ways to go about it. And then just, if I'm in that seat, like, I've been pulled over and I've had my friends say, hey, hands here, and we're all just sitting in the car like, man, we don't want to be on TV like that. We don't want this to go that way. And I'm sure everybody who we talked about earlier, all those names were like, man, I don't want this to go that way. But sometimes it just happens, and it's sad. It's really sad. But that's just kind of how I really feel about a lot.
What angers you most about what you're not seeing happen in terms of justice and police reform? Ash, I'll start with you.
There's so much. I feel like in the generation that I grew up with, there was more of a sense of community. And, the police that were policing my community, most of them grew up in my community, or, knew the families that grew up in the community, and little Joe down the block might have got a break for something stupid because, that cop grew up with their grandmother or whatever, just kind of policing the community in a very different way. as the years go on and gentrification happens and other things and communities start to change, other people are brought into neighborhoods that they might not know so much about. And that brings ignorance, that brings fear. I grew up in Cambridge, so I don't have the same I don't have the same experience as someone in North Carolina or, you know, in the South, and where the temperament's different. I have police in my family. I don't think all police are bad. I think that how you act on how you feel is a person-to-person thing, right? Policing as a whole is a system that was created. That system is broken. But then if you bring a person who is racist or has feelings, and then acts on said feelings, that's a whole different issue. So that I think that there are many different issues that need to be addressed. But like starting with, you know, training for these police in situations so that they can't use fear as a response to something, holding police accountable just as everyone else for their actions is something that needs to be done. In conversations, us learning about, you know, what exactly, how we need to respond, and police learning about how they should be properly policing.
Your comment just reminded me of the case that just happened a couple of weeks ago with a Army staff sergeant who was pulled over by police officers because they couldn't see the tags in his truck. He was in his full fatigues and everything, and the Army sergeant is saying, I'm fearful. I'm afraid to take off my seatbelt. And you hear the police officer saying, you should be. And so I think that speaks to that temperament, that bravado, whatever you want to call it, or these pre-existing ideas and thoughts and feelings about people who don't look like you. You know, what is it we can do, you young people can do? I mean, Black Lives Matter has been a entirely youth movement as far as I'm concerned. But what more can you say as young people to get people to understand that, you know, you're tired of seeing this. You're tired of seeing these killings now happening almost every week, if not every. We've had like several just since the verdict of last week. Kyle, what kind of things what more can young people do?
I don't know.
Can I jump in? I'm sorry. I feel like that's the problem. Like, we don't know the answer. It's never been any different. So all the work that we're doing has been done before, right? We've protested. We've been doing this, and it's never been any different. So no one really has any answers to how things are going to change. Yes, we got voting, we have police reform, we have all these steps that we're supposed to be taking. The steps aren't being taken, and this just keeps happening. So I would love to hear an answer from anyone.
I mean, I think we also don't know with reasonable cause, because it's not our problem to fix. It's not our problem. We didn't create this problem. And so we can explain how it's hurting us and all of that, but it's not our problem to fix. And personally, I'm pretty done with trying to explain my Blackness to people who don't. If you don't realize that there is a racism issue in our country, then you're not listening.
I think this isn't, of course, there's no one solution that's going to fix everything. But what I would like to see is just more consistency. What I mean by that is that for the first time last year, we saw all 50 states protest about the same thing for the first time ever. And then after maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, it just died down. Then after like a month, it just died down. And everything just dies down after a while. Then something else happens, and we cause a buzz, and we do this, that. And then after a while, we just die down. But I don't think we always realize how much power we have if we stay consistent. If we were like, all the time, people say, boycott this, boycott that. Okay, we made boycott for like 3 weeks. Then we're like, okay, maybe I want to go back now. No, if we really were to actually realize how much power we have in staying consistent, I think that would actually be so like noticed, instead of like taking like all the times where people say cancel this person or cancel that. If we really were to stick with that and not give up, like not let in after like 6 months, like if you really stick with that, then people are really going to say, oh wow, maybe we should do this. And after a while, I kind of get past the feeling of feeling like the system's broken, because I honestly don't think it's broken. I just think it wasn't meant for us in the first place. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's like this towel. If it wipes the sweat off my forehead, it's doing what it's supposed to do. If it stops doing that, somebody's gonna say it's broken. But if it was meant to do that in the first place, it's just doing what it's supposed to do. This when it was created, it wasn't created with us in mind. It's created saying, okay, control Black people, control this, control that. It's just doing what it's been meant to do. I just think we need to create a stronger system that knocks that one out. We can't keep feeling like we're waiting on other people to fix, or feeling like we have this, that, and the third. Eventually, we just have to come up with our own stuff that's just going to overpower what anybody else has to think about it.
So when we hear about mass school shootings, which have also unfortunately been things, we didn't hear any in the last year, obviously because kids haven't been in school. But when we heard about mass school shootings, they immediately were legislators, we need gun reform, we need this, we need that, we need to change this, we need police in school, everybody wants to jump up and start throwing out ideas about how we keep this from happening. Why aren't we hearing our legislators speaking out against these killings from police officers? Why aren't we hearing that same level of rhetoric? Go ahead, Brian.
I'll add this, and I think it has a great point. And I think we see so many more promotional and so many more like notable things about those school shootings, because 9 times out of 10, a lot of times what happens in those school shootings is that the kids don't look like us. When the kids don't look like us, and when it starts affecting other people that don't look like us, and it starts affecting their kids, it starts affecting their community, then they're like, oh man, now we should do something. But now when it's affecting us, they're like, oh, that has nothing to do with me, so I'm not gonna worry about that yet. But when it's at their front door and they have nothing else to do about it, I think then they're like, okay, we should do something about that.
I think from that point, fundamentally, it's still within. I think there are like Black representatives in Congress that obviously are people like us, obviously see what goes on, but have to hold their tongue. I don't get it. Like there are people that it's hard to talk about this without getting emotional. It's just like the 20s. It's like the 20s repeating itself. That's what I see. Is I think that's Ash was saying earlier. It's just nothing. There's no bills that are being passed that are helping any kind of Black people, but bills that are helping other people that only specific to those people off of minor things that just happened because of COVID. Like, I'm not trying to, really like devalue anybody like losses or anything like that, but just the cycle, and there's nothing being done for us. And I'm like, I don't know what could be done from that political standpoint. There's people there that's not, so I don't know.
One of the things that is, to me, fundamentally clear is the role that social media has played in these police shootings. Had it not been for Darnella Frazier, she was a 17-year-old girl who recorded George Floyd's murder. She never stopped recording. She didn't turn around and take a selfie. She didn't, go off into other areas. She stood right there on that shot. And for someone from that age, and Journey, this is your age range. For someone for that age to be so poised and be so focused on, without even understanding it, being an advocate for George Floyd in that moment as best she could, I think changed the whole game. We would not have had a murder conviction had it not been for Donnella Frazier. So how do we use social media to continue to push this message that we are not going to stand for these police killings? What more can people in social media do to help with this message?
I think it's really important that people with influence, people who have followers and such, also promote these types of ideas, and not just like the everyday people. And petitions and signing petitions and things like that will also help. But I think at this point, it's up to people with substantial power, people in the political sphere, to take some action on it. And the main reason why I think that politicians kind of leave this subject out is because race is, I think, the most polarizing topic, more so than gun reform or women's rights or anything like that. Race is so dividing, and it's unfortunate because a lot of times you're talking about real people, you're talking about real bodies, and you're putting a political value on them.
I think about myself a lot. I try to put myself in, just maybe it's feeling a sheltered thing. Maybe I feel like I've been sheltered or whatever, but I've tried to put myself in a bunch of situations, and I know the times are different, but for whatever teenager that I was, to try to see me in a similar position holding a camera phone, I don't see it. I see me either doing something to try and stop it or trying to get myself away from, and I'm not saying I could stop it, but I see myself trying to go forward and try to stop it, or getting myself as far away from the situation so I don't put myself or anybody else in harm's way. And I think that just speaks to just young people just really developing. Our generation I clearly think my generation was a little too erratic to be able to do something that important. But back to the social media thing, no, I think there's nothing wrong with having a platform and doing something impactful with it.
Ashley, how do you see social media in how it's affecting how and why we're seeing all these stories? And is it helping? Is it hurting?
I mean, I think it just depends on who you are. I feel like, for me, I don't want to see it all the time. Some people, I'm glad that we're having the conversation, and I'm glad, that people that may have not been privy to what's going on in the world can now see it. But I do think that everyone has a part to play in, the change that we do see in the future. And it's not our job, but when we have kids, raising our kids right, not allowing our friends to be ignorant, educating ourselves and being able to have the right conversations. I think that was a big one with me. At my job, there's a lot of educated people and people from all over, and being able to keep up with some conversations and not getting angry. I felt like in a certain conversation, I couldn't come up with a response because my emotions got in the way and I got upset. I got really angry, and I was angry at myself because I didn't have the proper tools in that moment to respond the way that I needed to. And then I went back, I talked to some people, I educated myself, and then this is not my job to do, but I feel like if I can somehow, for me, and this is just me, because I'm open to having these conversations, because everyone may not agree with the way I think, I'm still interested in hearing what you have to say, and maybe teaching you something. But then, I just have to be on top of my game. So I feel like everyone has a part to play in some way. Yeah, but I think social media is great because now people get to see, the world gets to see what's really happening, because it's been happening this way. It's just out there for people to see now.
Brian, I want to pose this question to you because it's specific to your state. And that's the thoughts about making police body cam footage available to the public in all instances. A Senate Bill 510 was proposed earlier this month to require all law enforcement agencies in the state of North Carolina to release any body cam footage as public record after a 48-hour period. What are your thoughts about releasing body cam footage?
I think it's a kind of a no-brainer, and I think we're seeing it now with the case that's going on in Elizabeth City, where the family was like, "Why haven't we seen the body cam footage?" And the police are like, "Well, we need it for this or we need it for that," and then the family only gets shown, I think they said like 20 seconds of it. I'm like, right. At this point, it shouldn't be it should be a no-brainer thing. It's like you already should, if you are scared of what people are going to see you're doing on your body cam, you probably shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So I definitely think that it's something that needs to happen.
I feel like the issue before that, right, is that there's still not good police, you know? So you give the not good police these cameras and want them to use them the right way. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen. So like Brian said, it's like a system that was never built to work the right way in the first place. So it needs to be dismantled and completely rebuilt so that it works. Because if not, we can keep putting Band-Aids and getting cameras, and some people will use them and others won't. It'll work out for some instances and others won't. You know, yes, the guy was held accountable for George Floyd's murder, but then, you know, there was a young girl who was killed at the same day.
And not to cut you off, Ash, but to really just harbor on the fact that Chauvin wasn't convicted, so riots don't ensue. Well, protests, and, you know, as a cover of the protest, riots don't ensue by other people with other agendas, for, you know, for capitalism, not for, you know, anything else.
The Power Play typically ends with asking our guests 3 questions, but instead I wanted to each ask you this one question. When it comes to justice, police reform, however you want to call it, what are your hopes and what are your fears? And I'll start with you, Brian.
My hope is that my mom never has to get that phone call saying that something has happened to me. My hope is that my kids don't have to fight the same fight. My hope is that there is some type of way where I can say 10 years from now, man, it's night and day compared to what it is, compared to what it was. That's my hope. My fear is that people stop caring. My fear is that it gets worse. My fear is that people are saying, okay, we've gotten away with it before, what's gonna change now? Those are my fears. And that's just, you know, everyone always says like, we don't walk outside with fear, but like you have that, like there's a constant worry being a Black person walking outside and just kind of feeling like, man, you just never know. So I guess just those are my hopes and my fears of what I really think is just gonna happen.
Journey?
I think my hope is that we can create a better system in which police officers are held accountable for their actions, but also receive the training beforehand so they fully understand diversity in general, race, disability, like, because, you know, it's not just Black people who are misjudged during these situations, although, you know, Black people experience it the most. And then my fears are that politicians continue to ignore this problem, and that the same thing just keeps happening, and that people lose hope as a result of it, for a better future, and stop fighting.
It's a lot of, it would just be reiterated of what we were talking about. A lot of police don't police their own community. That there's a problem with that. I don't go around places that I'm not familiar with acting like I run the place, acting like entitled, this, that, and third. But I guess my hope would be that moving forward, police would be a little bit more trained in the mental aspect, not as just the physical aspect, which they are trained for. We shouldn't have issues. Well, okay, I'm not gonna go there. I want more mental focus to be put into becoming a police officer, as well as I want more people in general, forget police, just everybody, just to not, I shouldn't say Black people should, I don't know. I was gonna say like everybody should see therapy, but I don't want to just put that out there. I do think everybody should see therapy, see a therapist, because I can't imagine the things that these issues keep doing to me. It's just me. This is just me. Like, I can't imagine like what it's like for everybody else. So
yes, I agree. We all need therapy. On top, all of the things happening in the world, on top of a pandemic, on top of our regular life stuff. Yes, I think my hopes are that eventually we actually see some real change. My fear is that we're gonna have to burn it down first to get it right. So I don't think that this next generation is going to continue to allow. I don't think it's their job, but I don't think it's going to continue to happen the way that it has been happening. It is, people are either going to break or they're going to break something. And I hope that it doesn't happen either way.
I want to thank you all for joining me today. This won't be the last conversation, and unfortunately, but I'll love to have you guys back in a few months, and we can just kind of see where we are. And I think that Kyle's sweatshirt says it all, that we should all be kind. So I thank you all for just joining me today. Remember, you can listen to past episodes of the PowerPLAY Show wherever you subscribe to podcasts, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, and now Pandora Podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Simply search the Hub8 Productions Media channel and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode of the PowerPLAY Show. And we air each Saturday at 5 p.m. on BroncoEyeRadio.com. The operations manager, Brian Barber, was our guest today. And so there's so many ways that you can listen to the PowerPLAY Show wherever you subscribe to podcasts, by watching us on YouTube by searching the Hub8 Productions Media channel, or you can just go to our website, thepowerplayshow.com. Until next time, I'm Tonya McGrath, and I leave you with this thought. While you want us to understand that all cops aren't bad cops, we want you to understand our fight for all Black people to have the right to live.